Buffering. Okay, and we are live. It is currently 2017 UTC, which is 1517 local time here in Colombia, in Eastern Standard Time. We're currently here with the Q&A and critique number 77, and I'm here with some very good friends. I'm very happy for the company. We're just chilling here for the past 15 minutes, catching up, getting up to date with our lives and things. It was very, very nice, and I'm very excited to share this time with a special guest, an art review, and a little bit of a walkthrough from some popular geometry nodes tweets that I've been doing over the past. So the special guest of today is Barella. So Barella...
Hello, everyone.
Hey! So Barella is a very cool artist who has been intuitively pushing and pulling nodes inside of geometry nodes in Blender and in Houdini. And he has been creating rock generators, terrain generators, tree generators, and others. And today we're going to be looking at, specifically, through his inspiration, his process, and his journey with his tree generation. And after that, we're going to take a look at some art by Slinc, which was submitted earlier today, which is a visual effects shot, which is quite good actually. So hold on to your horses before we get to that. Or maybe be talking a little bit about color balancing there when he shows. And at the end, I'll be going through a little bit of the nodes that I have been studying with some examples earlier this week, if there's time. This may be a shorter session today since I do have a flight to catch later, just to another city. But without further ado, let's begin. And Barella, let's dig up these questions and learn a bit more about you. So, Barella, tell me about how are you today?
I am quite fine today, thanks, Grace. I had a great day. I spent some hours working and fixing up my Blender files for tonight, so I'm quite warmed up already, and I'm quite happy to be your guest at long last.
At long last, yes, I've known you a while. I've been watching your journey for more than a year or so, and you have come a long way, and you've been a huge source of inspiration with this geometry nodes journey that I'm taking this year. So I'm actually, the honor is mine to have you today. Sorry for taking so long.
It's absolutely fine, and thanks again. I'm extremely happy to be part of B4Artist in the weekly interview family.
That's right. Okay, so tell me about your art. Where did it come from? When did you start? Where did you start with your art?
Well, I actually, when it comes to 3D art and 3D modeling, it actually happened by accident almost, because I think I was 14 years old, was just starting with high school, and by accident, I discovered SketchUp, the architecture software. It was kind of free, and mostly it was fun. And I had a friend, which I still have, which is older than me by a couple of years, and he saw my works and told me, you should try this software. It's free. It's called Blender. It's super cool. It's like 3D modeling, everything. And I was like, well, okay, let's try it. Let's see it. And that was 14 years ago.
14 years ago, and that's when you began.
Yeah, more or less, yeah. But it was a very low learning curve at the beginning. For years, and I basically only focused about learning all the procedures, learning all the corners of the software, where everything was, learning the shortcuts. I didn't really improve a lot artistically for years because I was just focused about learning the software. And in the more recent years, when I came back, because I had like a couple years of stop with 3D, when I came back, I decided to use the knowledge I had and put it in practical to create stuff and not only to learn how to make stuff. And
Nice.
that was basically the way
I also
started.
I also realized that you also had a little bit of a formal education concerning your art as well, correct?
Yeah, my high school was on classical academical art focused kind of high school. Um, so it was 5 years when you basically study history of art, learn to draw, paint, sculpt, the more classical kind of art you can think of. And if I have to be honest, to be able to learning 3D while training on a more academical point of view was extremely useful because it gave me the ability to focus on a more three-dimensional point of view, even while drawing. So
Mm.
it helped me learning anatomy, perspective drawing, on an invaluable level that it will took me way more years. And on the other hand, learning anatomy at school helped me a lot, modeling, and so it was these two things unrelated with each other, but that intertwined very well in my career as a student. And then after high school, been I've applied to uh, um, Fine Art Academy here, Italy,
Oh,
where
nice.
I studied illustration and comic book art. And that was basically the same concept, but applied on a higher level because it wasn't an high school, but an academy. Until I recently decided to drop the academy to focus only on my study of 3D art, desperate trying to make it a job.
Make it into a job. You certainly have the
Yeah.
skills for it. That's for sure. I've been going through some of the art that you have shared with me earlier on throughout the year. Some of it you can see on your Twitter profile. You've done some cool shading, some procedural rocks, some art pieces from November, including this dystopian piece that reminds me a lot of Undercurrents on Andor, actually.
Oh, okay.
But you released it before I watched before the show came out.
Yeah, I have to be honest. The most invaluable part of my learning curve was actually joining Discord and joining Arendelle server, meeting you guys. That helped me so much. It got my skill level to the roof, to the ceiling, and beyond. To have the constant feedback, the constant help, that was actually a major boost.
That's true. Yeah, because you mentioned earlier, like on your Twitter just recently, that you started learning these nodes and were working through this technical art, even though you've had a very intrinsic, hands-on type of classical art education. You've gone into tech art almost with no formal background in the concept of tech art, but you've managed to master it quite nicely, including this piece here, which I really love, where you have a tree inside the light, inside of this cavern, metallic cavern with pipes and everything. So
Yeah, thanks.
I know you made this piece in November, and so this means you've done it in a couple of days.
Yeah, one afternoon. That's all the time I had.
Which is absolutely incredible. So I wanted to dive a little deeper into that, and
yeah, if you want, I can open that specific November file. If you want to have a look at it first.
excellent. Let's take a closer look. But before we open up the file, or while you do it, I do have a small little question concerning these nodes, since we're in the tone of geometry nodes for these days for fun. What is your favorite node?
Well, to be fair, if you'd asked me this question a couple months ago, I don't know what I would answer. Because since I started learning Udini, I realized how many nodes Blender is missing, and that will make your life so much easier. But nevertheless, if I have to pick one,
You could pick it in Houdini too. I mean, I love the idea of Houdini's mid-level and high-level nodes.
Well, okay, if I have to pick in Houdini, it must be, I don't really have a choice here. It's hydraulic and thermal erosion node.
Thermal erosion and hydraulic erosion? Wow.
You plug it, you let it buffer, and you watch it happen. It's addictive. It's just addictive.
What you used with this piece here of the splash screen, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
This is one of my favorite pieces of yours concerning landscapes that you've done. The detail of
my first Houdini render, and the modeling is based on a tutorial, and just to learn about the terrain workflows in Houdini, but all the shading and personal choice and volumetric fog and everything was added by me just wandering around software, and I'm quite happy with the result.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. It's amazing you can do it with just one node.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insanely powerful, but it also it has its problems. And what I mean by that is, if you add erosion to a terrain, you are implying that the terrain is very, very big. Because, like, if you have, for example, a 1 meter by 1 meter piece of land, and you apply erosion to it, that there wouldn't be anything to see, because the erosion is something that happens on a large scale. And this is something I realized by actually making terrains and just thinking, okay, this doesn't make sense. For some reason, this isn't realistic. I don't know, it's not working. So I started digging a bit more into it. I ended up reading a couple of papers about geological studies, which I didn't understand on a technical level, obviously, but the main thing was, and you can think of it as it's the same, to make another example, with depth of field. Like, if you use depth of field, your brain is suggesting you that the scene is small.
Correct.
Because if you make a panoramic pictures of a landscape, there wouldn't be actually, like, the far back mountain still in focus, just smaller. So if you defocus it, blur it, it should be because it's small, because actually change of focus, blurs, happens with macro pictures of little things.
That's an interesting concept. So in this case, for the sense of scale, like typically you're in an aircraft, you have an open lens and you'll see everything almost crystal clear just from the distance. So the light.
Yeah, precisely.
So in this case, in order to get your depth of field or the depth of your scene, you'll be using atmosphere, which is what you used up here in the top.
Yeah, this is just a massive volumetric cube with a low scatter level that just adds up. And actually, this scene, I made a little mistake here, because what I didn't understood in the tutorial was the scale that we should work on. So instead of working with a total size of 1,000 meter by 1,000 meter, I accidentally worked with 25 kilometers for 25 kilometers.
Wow.
So the scene is absolutely huge.
Yeah, it's beyond the horizon almost. I think, as far as you know, you can only see about 8 kilometers, typically.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I absolutely lying. What happens in reality.
All right. Okay, so when it comes to your favorite node in Blender, now that we know that Houdini is absolutely OP when it comes to fully functional nodes on a higher level, what is your favorite node in Blender and why?
If I really have to pick, I think I really like a very low tier node, the resample curve.
The resample curve node?
Yeah, because it, in my opinion, it's one of the nodes that more than everything else brings with it the concept of proceduralism. Because as long as you have a curve, you can change the amount of points that the curve is made. You can make it higher resolution, lower resolution. You can add more points, remove points at any moment, and you can use those points to instance things and be more or less precise, add more or less definition. And I don't know, for some reason, I just really love using it. And as much as I love working in general with proceduralism in geometry nodes, I try to keep all of my works only or majorly curve based because I just more intuitive than using meshes.
And the other added thing about curves is you can draw it as if you were under control as an artist. So it's another nice
Absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. To be able to draw a curve that creates the object you're working with, absolutely incredible, and it's so powerful. And it's something that once you start doing, you can't really go back.
Sounds like something good to be addicted to. One of these examples of you using these curve nodes or curve controls is with this cliff drawing system that you created as an asset pack on Blender Market.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, on my computer is extremely responsive, like it's super fast. Like to draw this whole scene was just to draw two curves and instantly everything popped up, no loading it, however.
It's absolutely awesome. Yeah, curves for layout and things like this. I remember you working through this project with the high level of the wet rocks, the rock designs, and the baking and things like this. But at the end of the day, you managed to create a layout system where you just drew it into the scene and you would decorate the world with some very cool layouts, which I really liked.
Thanks a lot. You actually have been very fundamental in that process, teaching me a lot of how to make asset ready pack.
Oh, thanks. Oh, I'm glad it helped. Okay.
Yeah,
so
by a long time.
It was a while. So let's move on to, so now that we know that you like your curves, and today's topic is really about curves. I've been studying curves over in Twitter while I've been with Plebes, and I have been taking a look at each individual node and making a short little example, which I'll be showing and teasing later on after this interview at the end of today. But basically, with the curves, we have a lot of power, and I wanted to ask you in depth, how could we use these curves, or how could we use geometry nodes to create trees? So, have you? Let me just take a look.
Yeah, I can share my screen.
Yep, and I'll log in.
Here we go. Tell me if you see it. Is everything fine?
Yeah, let me just pop you up, and I should probably start the event on Discord. Whoops. Pop it out. 1 second as it loads. I'm still in the process of purchasing a computer, but I'll be there soon, and then things will be much faster.
Everyone is cheering for you about that.
He's been saying that for the last 6 months.
But only just recently have I actually got the money to do it. All right, I can see your tree now. Wow, looks incredible.
I'm getting sick of this new computer.
Yeah, I know. Oh my god. Wow, that looks incredible. Okay, so explain it to us. What are the fundamentals of this tree generator? How does it work?
Okay, so when you open up this file, you have this massive node, and you say, okay, it's massive, I'm scared. But if you look closely, it's actually separated compartments where the first one is about the main trunk, and then you have the second and the third branches, and leaves. So everything should be tweaked by the top to the bottom in this order in order to make everything consistent. But for sake of clearance, I think I will spend most of the time inside the node tree because all these groups are already separated, so it's easier to explain myself.
Okay.
So the main idea here in my head was that, like, how does trees work? Basically, a tree, you can think of it in a very convoluted way as a massive branch popping out of the ground with little branches and even little branches coming out of the little ones from before. So it's kind of a recursive element where everything happens on the next generation of elements create.
Okay.
So the first thing I did was to create the trunk. And how does the trunk work? It's fairly simple. Basically, I create a line and a circle that you can see it here, and a point. And why I do this, I will explain in a second. And then I instance on those points my line. And then the first thing I do, which is the most important thing probably of the old project, is that I store the spline parameter.
Yes, I love this node.
Spline parameter of the first line of this one. Because, as you know, spline parameter basically gives you a value from 0 to 1 from the bottom to the top
of the
of a given
factor.
curve.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is extremely useful because you can use it to drive everything, basically everything. So
Yeah,
once I get
the trunk
here,
width.
I add some noise and I start twisting it more and more. Oops.
Looks
And
like my hair when I wake up in the morning. A
Yeah.
strand of hair.
And all these little groups are little modifications that are based on the parameter that I captured before.
Okay, so you're capturing it and you're calling it with the named attribute nodes inside the node
Yeah.
groups. Down the tree.
Precisely.
Oh, that's handy. I'm still waiting for
And-
Blender to release their wireless nodes or portals.
Yeah. And then after that, I just do this thing that basically smooth the curves out a bit because it's just too noisy. And I just feel more handy to smooth it than to use a lower value noise because I want to have full control on, and then maybe decide to smooth less. And then what I do is just give it a parameter and a profile, and that's it. And the reason why I created a circle and a point is because I want to have the ability to create a single trunk tree or
Multiple trunks.
a multiple trunk tree that is driven by simply the amount of points I want that circle to have.
It's very
And go
cool.
from free to infinite, as long as your computer can handle it, of
Yeah,
course.
that's right. Just don't slide too far. Too fast.
Yeah, and the other thing I do here pretty immediately, right after I instance these lines on the circle, is to capture the indices that I create. Because right at here at the alt, I use this index to basically split the trunk in two.
Into two separate noises. So you have, like, for example,
Yeah,
3
and
or
I
4
can
of them with
decide.
one noise.
Yeah, and I can decide how much I want from one side, from the other side, where I want the other side to go. And this is handy because it lets you have more advanced control, and trees not always come with a single trunk. It depends.
Right.
And maybe you want to create some custom weird thing, and with this you can do it. So, and at the end you end up with a separated tree with an offset control and a separate noise for you to do whatever you want.
Okay, so this is the
So
tree
after
trunk,
that,
and you mentioned that these are recursive. So you have branches that come next, and then from the branches you work through the twigs, but it works in a similar
Precisely.
concept.
Yeah, precisely. So
let's see if I can guess. Once you have the trunk, are you instancing new spawn points up the trunk to then repeat the process of what you did with the trunks from the new spawn points? I guess you could say.
basically, yes.
Aha.
Yeah, basically. Actually, what I did here, initially I didn't do it in this way, but if I recall correctly, please help me, give me a very smart idea to instance the second generation of branches on a thinner version of trunk to be sure that the branches were sticking inside the main trunk, not outside and weird artifacts problem. So what I end up is this that is absolutely too much. So let me just,
Yeah, it almost looked like a tree made out of hair.
yeah, let's use a single tree, easier to understand. And what I have with the second generation of branches, of course, it's the density, and then I have a control to decide whether I want them stop spawning after a certain height of only after a certain height. And then I can trim them if I'm not happy with the length or whatever. I can control the length of the higher one and the lower one separately. I can rotate them, because of course you want them to be at least some random rotation happen. And then I have a parabolic
fall off, which is based on gravity.
Yeah, of course, after certain
value starts going into itself.
Yeah, precisely. And that helps you basically get more natural shapes, so specific. Because
so
the idea is
how did you do the parabolic fall off?
Yeah, so the parabolic fall off, I don't even know if he remembers it, but was actually something that Shmuel, here more, suggested me, because as I said before, I absolutely have no knowledge of math whatsoever, so I couldn't figure it out, and he very gently gave me the notes to do it, which is very simple. It's an exponent with a multiplication, you add them together, you multiply, you pick a coordinate, you've done it.
And it's done.
That's it.
And that's based on the factor of the curve?
No, this is just based on the... No, yeah, I was sorry. Yeah, this is based on the factor of the curve, yeah.
Okay, so the 0 to 1, and you run that through the power math with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, so simple.
Yeah, yet so effective.
Okay.
And here again, even though we are in the second branch node groups, I am calling back the first parameter of the main trunk, because I want to be able to have the lower branches to be more horizontal and the upper one to be more vertical. And to do that, I do this. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's wrong. I don't really know. I basically have a mix between the original position, which is this, in this case, because of all the parabolic fall-off we added, and this, which is extremely upward. And I use the original trunk parameter to mix between them. So the more you go up, the more the branches stick up, like a real tree.
Oh, that's quite clever. Nice and simple, but clever.
Yeah, and this is basically, I am trying with my limited knowledge of maths and everything, physics, and obviously botanics, to recreate how a real tree works. Basically, a bigger trunk gives the rules, and the branches have to follow.
Okay, so this leads on to my next question, actually. You mentioned that you've done it without math knowledge. So what is your process when it comes to these geometry nodes? How do you approach this system without maths in mind, but with the tree in mind? What is your process through that?
Basically, my process when it comes to using math nodes, which are the core principle of working procedurally, basically, there's not going around that. Is that, and I know maybe it's a little embarrassing, but I don't really have any idea of how most of the nodes work. I only know the effect they create when I use them. So it's basically muscle memory.
And intuition, I suppose, from experience.
Precisely, yeah. And most of it I learned it working with shaders when you have when you can see with colors and grayscale gradients what's happening when you add math. But probably, yeah, the most math thing I know is that if you subtract a value from one, you invert it. That's basically probably the most techy.
Which is a good tip to keep in mind. I always forget about that one.
Yeah, but like fun fact, if I think about it, it doesn't make sense in my, because I can, even if it's extremely basic math, I have a really hard time going around it and figure how the hell this is possible. But I know it works, and I don't have any reason to oppose the knowledge that it works. So I just stick with it. I use it because it works.
Because it just works.
Yeah, if it works, it works. And then
there's no correct way of doing it as long as it's working.
Yeah, precisely. And then, yeah, what I do is with the third branches, it's the same again. With the only difference is that instead of creating a name adapter for the branches parameter, I just connect it. So at the very end of the second branch, I capture the parameter of all the branches, and I pass it down to third tweaks section, which is basically the same once again. And I'm using the second branches plus the value I pass to basically distribute the points and to decide how thick they are, because like if they are down, they are thicker. If they're up, they are lighter, because they have to stick upwards and their weight.
They're also younger as well.
Yeah, precisely. Other than that, it's the same principle again, with the only difference of this little Boolean section where I use the second branch attribute to basically decide where I want the leaves to spawn, where not, and I show it right away.
Okay, so you started to create a filter, and now you're spawning the leaves.
Yeah, basically, if I go here, where this Boolean section is, if I
that's cool.
I have the max and the mean value. Okay. It's all a matter of adding controls, but without losing performance, which is already, I have to admit, it quite a bit performance hungry can get quite.
How do you think you'd be able to optimize this?
Well, the major thing I did was lowering the resolution of everything, the amount of rows circle has, the amount of points, because there's a certain limit after that your eye doesn't see difference. Because I mean, if you are working with a hero tree that is subject of the render, you are perfectly fine with adding all the detail you want subject. But if you have to create a decent scatter in the background, you don't really care about hyper tail mesh density. You just want like a tree, so you can create like 4 different scattered houses in the background, have a forest, and call it a day. So yeah, that is probably the most important exercise when working with this kind of process. Learn when it's necessary to add detail,
And when
because
it's
it's
okay
very
not
easy
to.
to over.
Yes.
Yeah, precisely. It's very
Yes.
easy to over.
To some degrees, I do like working with procedural meshes and work for games, because the games, as a rule of thumb, you have to think about not overdoing it and getting away with as little detail as you can to get the most amount of detail without going to overperform it. So I do like that
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah, precisely. And also, I forgot to mention that all the tree section are UV unwrapped.
Oh, that's nice.
They add at the end, they get added together, because I made this file in Blender 3.3.
And UV unwrap nodes were not existent at that time.
No, they did exist, but it was so slow that I just decided it was faster to just capture the actual, bake it together at the end, like here, use it as a coordinate system, which works. So I'm fine. And yeah, for the texture, I just downloaded an HDRI Heaven tree texture for the tree, because the texture is still in dev, so I didn't care to making it itself like substance line. I just wanted it to look like a.
That's true. And there are many bark textures that are CCO out there.
Yeah, precisely. And I did the same for the leaf. The leaves are just your image that I downloaded, and I created the normal, alpha, and roughness out of it. Just use it with a bit of randomization. You the shader, and that's it. It's
Beautiful.
It's quite powerful. Yeah, I am pretty sure you can make, probably, as long as you have the textures for the leaves. I mean, you can probably make almost every kind of possible you can think of with them, unless they are super complex or that require obviously dedicated generator.
Dedicated, pardon, you cut out there in the last second.
Dedicated generator.
Right, right.
But
Okay.
yeah, I am extremely happy with this file. I think it's one of my favorite projects so far.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the one that I am more happy.
And did you use this tree generator with that image of the building,
Yeah,
tree inside the actual building here?
I absolutely did, yeah. And at the time, it was very unoptimized, so it was such a pain to work with that in the file. If you're curious, just for the sake of having a laugh, I can open that file and show it. The whole node. It's very unpolished because, of course, I was in a hurry, but just
yes, one afternoon is not a lot of time to polish.
No, definitely. Just oh yeah, November file 4/7/8, yeah. Okay. Do you see the updated file?
Yes, I do. I see the vines in the wall, the grass in the ground, the pipes. Very cool.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So basically,
wait, you built the whole thing in the same tree?
Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah. Yeah. So for this, that
was a very Arendelle move of you.
Yeah, the idea was, if they can do it, I can do it, but worse.
Very good mantra.
Yeah, that's basically my mantra about everything.
If they can do it, I can do it worse.
Yeah. So what I did here was I created a massive circle. Yeah. And then I did something that is not doing anything right now, just to that I really know my thing here.
Yeah. With my own trees, I find that I have to write extensive frames and notes on everything I do.
Okay, yeah. So here I created a base.
Okay.
Because of course you don't have geometry nodes, and I don't know any of the super weird tricks to create them, so I just have to do things a lot of times. And then I randomly subdivide walls, I randomly extrude them, and this is like how I get the weird wall system.
Mm-hmm. Very good for greebles.
Yeah, precisely. This is my greeble. This is the same thing as here, but for the wall, for the floor. And then I do. Okay, this is the
grass
instancing, which is
generated it
an
too?
object. Yeah, but on another file because I couldn't generate it and also scatter it in the same file Blender explode, so I needed to create it a separate file. But
I think I read in the documentation Blender allows for 7 levels of instancing. So you can only instance and then 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 instance. Those instances 7 levels before it caps out.
Yeah, but so this grass is quite easy, but it gives away quite well the result.
Yes.
And here I have I have a shortest path selection that I smooth out a bit or make it interesting, and then I pipe it. I basically pipe it.
Wow, those pipes look very good.
Yeah, until you look here, like.
Oh yeah, wow, we can keep that in the shadow. Don't worry about that piece.
Yeah. I only show here for a very specific reason. Because this is another project that I made some months ago to create a pipe generator that works very well to draw them, but it works terribly if you instance them. But nevertheless, it got the job done, so I was happy.
Yes, you had one afternoon to do this.
Yeah, and like I basically masked the normal up the pipe to more grass over it to sell away all the artifacts. And here I have no idea what I have here. Okay, here we have the vine.
The vine pieces?
Yeah.
And then you made them hang with that system you're talking about?
No, here I used, it's actually one of the first things I ever learned about making, because I remember, do you remember when Erin made the wire fluid for their toolkit? That node that basically fill every mesh with hanging curves.
Yes, I think I remember. It was a while ago.
Yeah, I was extremely obsessed with it, but at the time I was too broke to buy the node. So I just needed to find a way to make it, and I spent probably like 3 weeks just trying to use curves to figure out a way. And the best way I found to create hanging simulations, that hanging system, just take curve that 2 points, then you subdivide so it has 3 points, and then use the endpoint selection to select first and last, and you select the opposite, so center, and you drag it down, and that's it. That's absolutely it.
And then you smooth it out with a
weird
curve.
Yeah, you don't need to use weird modulus system where it's manipulation. You just need to have 3 points and
Yes, that's one thing I've really enjoyed about studying geometry nodes is there's no one way to skin a cat.
Precisely. And then I just noise and smooth, and I add
Leaf
more
system.
vine. So it's like this.
Oh, that's very cool.
And then I have, a lot of things. And a couple leaves. And what do we have here? Let's.
Well, my time is ticking at the moment, so unfortunately, I may have to wrap up this. Yeah, unfortunately. But I do have one last question for you. And it's about advice, because I'm also still a beginner, and I know many people still are, and most artists, they are not used to this concept. A lot of people push and pull vertices or draw by grabbing a pen, and they're getting into the software and they don't realize the power of this concept of, if you think about it and if you plan your things through and work it through, you can do some really cool pieces with very little time. So I wanted to ask you, for someone who's learning and starting out procedural modeling, what would be your number one advice from your experience?
Okay, from my experience, the most invaluable piece of advice I can to do not a ton, more, 1,000 times more of research about what you like to do, like what you want to create. Like, I want to make a house. Okay, so first thing, break it into little concepts. Like, I want to make a house. The first thing you have to ask yourself is, how detailed you are. You want to make a nice exterior, you want it to have the interiors, you want to have fundamentals, structure, and start working out a way to make those things separately, and then try to use all the information you achieve by making those pieces to create the next step. Because the most important thing about procedural is why it's so strong is that everything is intertwined, everything is connected, and everything stores and creates information that you then use and create to make the next. So yeah, just like I did with my tree, like I want to make a tree. So first thing to do, even when you're a kid, the first thing you do when you draw a tree is to trunk. The first piece.
Right. That's the first piece. It's the central piece of the tree that holds everything together.
Every time you make a new project, you have to ask, what is the central piece? What is the core piece? And how to make it? And then you start expanding and figuring out how to work the rest. And to make it happen, Google a lot, YouTube, tutorials, everything. You don't need to watch a 45-minute tutorial if it only contains 3 minutes of information that you need. You just need to find those 3 minutes of information and convert them into your own context of what you need with that specific process that the guy in the tutorial is doing.
That's good.
And repeat until you remember, until you open the Geometry Node tab, and you don't need to think, I need what node I need. You have to think only, what do I need to do? Because procedural is a language. So the nodes are not what you need to remember. And specifically, you need to remember the workflow and the process to achieve the result you want. I don't think like, okay, so I need to create a line and resample it. I think I need to create a trunk. And then I one node at a time, from left to right, I start dealing with it. Maybe it was a little convoluted, but this is so.
It's a good train of process. It's thinking from the root, root to the stem.
Precisely.
top-down type of view. That's good. Thanks for that advice, and thanks for explaining this, Barella. It actually, the more I've studied, I've been following your advice to some degree inherently by doing analysis and research and practicing, especially with the latest pieces that I made this week. For example, these little boats floating on a tangent. I was a little bit slow to learn it. Plebes did talk to me about how to do this, and it took me a while to understand it because my terminology was a bit broken. But
yeah, that's also a big problem. I think that one of the biggest obstacles in learning procedurally, learn terminology.
Learning all the terminology and things. But once I did start to learn the concept, making the little example, doing a bit more research on the nodes, I could eventually create what I needed to know and label it together. So
I love how you made your viewport look like
my viewport look like a what?
it looked like a game engine doing testing.
A little bit, yeah. So I understand, like, when you're explaining about your curves and things, I could understand basically how you're capturing your attributes, how you're calling it again, you're storing them in names. I understand what a field is now. Basically, it's an array of data.
I'm sorry. Maybe I rushed it a bit.
No, it's good.
But
it's good. Like, sometimes getting pushed into the deep end of things with a little bit more context gets you to a new level. So I highly appreciated it. So thanks for that. So we're going to wrap it up. We have one art piece that was committed for an art review by Slinc. If you're still here, he has been connected on Twitch.
Yes.
Yeah, you're here in Discord now. Excellent.
Hey, Slinc.
So
I saw him popping up on vent, so I think he's sus.
Alright, so I have the image here, which I've loaded into my browser. And Barella and I, we're going to take a quick close look at your image with some scrutiny and some positive feedback. And if you're happy to share the art, well, I guess I'll ask you first, tell us a bit more about your image. What do we have here?
Well, it's like a real background someone photographed and a random car model from what is this? I think like something
Ford Challenger. This is a Ford Challenger from
Good.
Yeah.
It's a Ford Challenger. It's
the
a
random
cool car.
The random car. So,
It's good. And your work was compositing, correct?
Yes. So the background is real, the car isn't, and the shadow too.
Nice. Yes, compositing 3D into footage is a tricky thing to do.
Yes.
But you managed to match the perspective very nicely and capture the reflections of lighting.
I used F-Spy,
I was about to ask that.
F-Spy, the camera aligning software, godsend, just yes. And then I really simply modeled out this concrete wall and floor. It's literally just like extruding, deleting stuff, and using like UV projection, so the textures behind the glass, like behind this glass of the car, I actually also CG wall. Yeah. So you can see it's like UV projected there.
Very nice. And what software are you using to do your compositing?
I used DaVinci Resolve Fusion for compositing for this one.
Very nice. The first time I hear someone use a video compositor software to composite actually smart.
That's fine.
That's true. My current job that I have at the moment is heavily reliant on Fusion. We do the compositing all the time. But I just realized
Fusion is great.
Blackmagic has like a separate Fusion, separate from DaVinci, but DaVinci also has another kind of a simplified version of Fusion built in with the nodes, correct?
Both the same?
Similar, yeah, very similar.
Both are the same.
Because one is stripped back without the video editor, and one is with more nodes.
Wait, it has more nodes there. But yeah, I used like the one in DaVinci Resolve, and it
That's
worked
good.
very, very good here.
Very nice. I love the
By
wireless
the way,
nodes.
I really like the job you did. The only thing that I think sells away the fact that the car there, that the front tires are completely lighted up, even when they touch the ground. There's like ambient occlusion, darken up. Like I can see it in the very front, the very front tire. You have camera lighten up
Mm-hmm.
very smoothly. I
Yeah.
think the bottom part darken because it's extremely over. I mean, the scene is very overcast, so it makes sense that you don't have a shadow unless the tires are bright. Should be a shadow, and the only other thing, because other than that, is very job.
Yeah.
Probably the glass to rock. The glass like doesn't have any particular reflection, which on one hand makes sense because from the overcast, but on the other hand, is some kind of behavior that only a very dusty window glass from a car do. A very clean car, as you can see in the paint, clear paint. There are very sharp reflections.
It maybe it probably is because it reflects like the sky, which was like very boring, plain white sky.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably.
Probably, yeah.
It like it's the HR from that scene, so it's like I could like I could put like clouds in there, but like there's no clouds in the shot, so I'm like, I guess.
That's okay.
No,
The,
yeah,
the
guess I
reflections on the
die.
left here I really like a lot. Yeah,
I
Alright, go ahead, Barella, sorry.
no, sorry. I was just about to say nothing. Go along.
Yeah, I like this piece. I mean, you got the perspective relatively quite good. I think...
Thanks, FSpy.
Yeah, Spy is quite handy. Have you tried the Blender add-on of FSpy? I think someone rebuilt another one inside Blender now, but I have not.
It was like, I think it was like $12 on Blender Market, I think.
Yeah, it's not free.
Yeah, but like FSpy is free and it probably isn't like that much more complicated. It's just like beep boop bop boop and the end.
That's right. Jeba mentions the FSpy's add-on is super handy. And I'm kind of drunk. You also mentioned earlier that node wizards work in mysterious ways. That's true. Just one thing to keep in mind when you're integrating footage is always the shadow. For me, like if I look in the corner of this photo here, into the cracks in the corner, I look at the darkest point, like here in the corner here, or inside the crack of the ground. You can see that it's kind of a light gray.
Do that. I actually didn't like check what is like the darkest color. I was just like, looking at gain and turning up down, and I was like, yeah, somewhere there is good enough.
You're eyeballing. But so in this case, the shadow under the car would actually receive quite a bit of light, and would be actually a lot lighter than the actual crack. So
yeah, that could.
That's one thing you would probably need to tune a little bit. And also, the car is white. I think that's right. But the light that's filling the world, you can see here on the trees along here, is slightly yellow or warm.
Yes, it actually was more bluish, but I graded it more to like more to a warm color, everything. But it was like plain blue sky, like the most boring sky you will ever see.
True, yeah, I quite like this look a lot more.
Like how boring can a sky be? Blue, nothing.
The blues are intense, it's just really hard to do with this RGB.
Yes, I actually used Aces for this.
Oh, that's good.
Yes. I tried to use the AGX color system from Blender, and no, don't ever use it for compositing CG tutorial. No, just no. Thank you.
Unless you have an AGX color transform built into the Fusion, and then you're okay.
Yeah, but then you need to match it to the image, which is then like in log form, and AGX is already like a transform, which is
But
not linear.
So is Asus and Filmic. All of them are transforms.
Yeah, but I can use like Asus log, and log is like linear. In this like, yes, finally,
Okay.
peace.
So if you're
Finally,
using log in
inner
one
peace.
software and log in the other, then it's going to be fine.
Yeah, it's all log, and then you're like, finally, peace. And then you have like one log footage, and then AGX with its transform already, which is like not log, like some sort of color transform. So it's like you see it into log footage, so you need to match the footage first to the CG and not the other way around, which makes, in my opinion, the real footage look like shit.
Yeah, because real footage,
So-
unless it's recorded in RAW, then it's not going to have all the
Yeah.
color data.
Yes. Yes, so I choose Asus with the log transform.
Gives you a bit more room to move around.
Yes, like so good.
All right, well, that's cool. Well, thanks for sharing this piece and letting that out there into the critique and feedback. Thank you, Barella, for your feedback as well and your keen eye on the reflections. It does seem a bit odd that I can't see the wall there. But
That was my
Well,
pleasure.
the wall is a physical object in there. Like it is like a shadow catcher physical object.
oh, nice. It's always tricky.
Can't
It's
see it when you
compositing
can
a
see through the
car.
glass.
True.
Ah.
Yeah, compositing a car is one of the harder
The
things to
worst
do.
thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, imagine compositing a chrome ball. You will die.
It would be
Imagine
tricky.
compositing a matte ball. Completely matte. Just 100% diffuse. You will also die. You used to think, well, it would be easier than a chrome ball, but it's still very hard. And a car is both.
That's true.
It is just
Right.
both.
It is chrome
You have the
and
worst
rubber
part
and
of
metal
both.
and glass at the same time, and also the metals, the painted metal car paint has got
Clear coat and
clear coat
stuff.
and everything else as well, microflakes and more. All right, okay, so I gotta
Yes.
go. Got a flight to catch and a bag to pack, and
Oh yeah, you are going to fly because it's cheaper than
taking a bus.
sending it per cloud.
Oh no, that's a different project. Well, they're doing the flight delivery. I'm not.
Well, thanks for doing this, dude. Thanks for putting this on.
Yeah, thanks for connecting,
Yeah.
everyone, and thank you, Barella,
Yeah,
as well
thanks
for the
a lot.
interview.
Thanks a lot,
Barella.
Grace. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Slinc, for sharing so much. This has been really awesome.
Good. We're going to keep it coming. We're going to see who's going to be the
Thanks, Dylan.
surprise guest for next week, and also the next topic, and also what other features we're going to see. So stay tuned. I'll be here same time, same place, come rain or shine. And I wish you all an excellent weekend and good fun with your art and your work, and enjoy whatever you do and however way you do it. So thank you again, Slinc, and thank you, Barella, so much for everything today.
Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.